All right, we are going to get started with correcting our adding and subtracting fractions review sheet. So we all have them out and ready to go. So, 5th grade, for the first part of our review sheet, we had to estimate. We had to look at our fractions and decide, is this fraction closer to a whole, so the whole number 1, a half, which is 1 over 2, or 0? And then we would come up with the answer. So, when we're looking at these, 2/3, that is closer to a whole because it's like a pizza that's been split into 3 pieces, and we're talking about 2 of those pieces. So 2 out of 3, that's close to a whole. But then when we talk about 1 out of 10 pieces, that's hardly any part of that pizza. So that is closer to 0. So 1 plus 0 is 1. Then for number 2, 8 out of 9 pieces. Again, that's close to 1. We're talking about 8 out of 9 pieces of a pizza. And then 4 out of 8, that's exactly half. So we have 1 plus a half, that equals 1 and a half, 1 and 1/2. Then number 3, we have 12 out of 15 pieces. So 12/15, that's pretty close to a whole. Then we're subtracting 3/7. Well, half of 7 is 3.5, and we have 3 out of 7. So that's pretty close to a half. So 1 minus 1/2 is 1/2. Do we have questions on estimating? Did anyone estimate differently? You want to know if it works? Will?
I accidentally did just added.
You added on the last one? Did anyone else accidentally do that? Or maybe you accidentally did it and then corrected yourself? Yeah. So, oh, Jack L.
Is there a way I could X by the ones that I did do and I check mark by the ones that I didn't?
Yes. Yeah, that works. Yeah, and so 5th grade, writing the correct answer off to the side, you can do that. That's correcting. Write the correct answer, and that way tonight you can go back and resolve those problems. Yes, Jack?
And I was kind of confused on the 1/2 one because 7 doesn't really have like a
half.
equal half.
Yep. Yep. Awesome. Good questions. Any other questions on these? Show me on your hands. How did you feel about estimating? 1 through 5, how did you feel about estimating overall? Okay. How do we feel about estimating overall? Drew, show me a number, please. Frankie, show me a number. Okay. Thank you. Hands down. Okay. So even if you don't have your review sheet, you should be following along with this. So I should see your eyes on my smartboard. Okay. So then the next set, we needed to find a common denominator. So we were given 2 fractions. We needed to first find the common denominator and then rewrite both fractions with that common denominator. If you're clicking a pen, please only click it if you need to write with it. Don't just be clicking it randomly. I know I'm a pen clicker, so I'm guilty of it too. Just be conscious of that. Okay, so we'll start with 4 and 5. So for number 4, we had 1/3 and 4/5. We have a 3 and a 5 as our denominator. The LCD, or the lowest common denominator, would be 15. So if we rewrite 1/3 with a denominator of 15, it would be 5/15, because we would multiply the 3 by 5 to get 15, so we would have to multiply the 1 by 5, so 5/15. And then 4/5, written with 15 as the denominator, would be 12/15, because we would take 5 times 3, so then we would have to take 4 times 3 for 12/15. Then for number 5, we had 7/9 and 2/3. 9 is actually the common denominator because 3 can go into 9. So 7/9 would stay the same. And then for 6/9, we would have to take 3 times 3 to get 9. So we would have to take 2 times 3 and get 6 for 6/9. Are there questions on 4 and 5? Okay, then let's look at 6 and 7. So 6 and 7, we were doing the same thing. There we go. For number 6, we had 10 and 8. So I know some people are looking at that and going, oh my gosh, I don't know what to do. And that you were thinking 80. 40 is actually the smallest common denominator, the LCD, because we can take 10 times 4 to get 40, and we can take 8 times 5 to get 40. So whatever we do to that denominator, we have to do to the numerator. So 10 times 4 gets us 40, so we would take 3 times 4 and get 12 for 12/40ths. And then for 9/8, we had to take 8 times 5 to get 40, so we would take 9 times 5 and get 45 40ths. So 5th grade, you'll notice that when we're doing this, just finding the common denominator and rewriting the fractions, you do not need to simplify. This is an improper fraction. You do not need to convert it to a mixed number when we're not adding or subtracting, okay? Then for number 7, 3/7 and 1/2. 7 and 2 are our denominator, so the denominator they would have in common, the smallest one would be 14. So we would take 7 times 2 to get 14, so we would take 3 times 2 to get the numerator, so 6/14. And then for 1/2, we would take 2 times 7 to get 14, so we would have to take 1 times 7 to get 7/14. Are there questions on 6 or 7? All right, show me on your hands 1 through 5. How did you feel about finding the common denominator and rewriting your fractions? Everyone show me. How did you feel about it? Okay, Jack P., how did you feel about it? Okay, awesome. Hands down. Now we're going to get into adding and subtracting fractions and mixed numbers. So we need to find the sum or difference. And remember, a sum is an answer to an addition problem. A difference is the answer to a subtraction problem. Of each pair of fractions or mixed numbers, show your work. So make sure you are showing that work. All right, we'll start with the top row. And I have my work here too. So for number 8, we had 7/8 minus 2/3. So the first thing I did was think, okay, I'm subtracting. They don't have a common denominator. I need to find that LCD, that least common denominator. Chanel, your book should not be out right now. So for 8 and 3, my least common denominator is 24. So I thought, okay, what do I need to do to the 8 to get to 24? Well, I have to multiply it by 3. So I'm going to do the same thing to my 7. 7 times 3 is 21. 8 times 3 is 24. So 7/8 becomes 21/24. Then for 2/3, same thing. What do I have to multiply 3 by to get 24? Well, I have to multiply it by 8. So then I would do the same thing to the numerator. 2 times 8 gets me 16. 3 times 8 gets me 24. So now I have 21/24 minus 16/24. When I subtract that, I end up with 5/24. In 5th grade, can we reduce 5/24? No, we cannot, because there is not a number that goes into both 5 and 24. So my answer is just 5/24. Then I had number 9. For number 9, we were adding. So again, I look at my denominator, 7 and 2. I think, what is their least common denominator? Well, 14. So I would take 7 times 2 to get 14. So I do the same thing to the numerator, 1. 1 times 2 gets me 2. So 1/7 becomes 2/14. And then 1/2, 2 times 7 gets me 14. So then I have to take 1 times 7 for the numerator. So 1/2 becomes 7/14. 2/14 plus 7/14 equals 9/14. And can we reduce 9/14? No, because there isn't a number that goes into both 9 and 14 besides 1. All right, then we come over to number 10. Number 10, I have mixed numbers. Now, I notice right off the bat, they have the same denominator, so I don't need to find an LCD. It already has it. So 4. So remember, we always start with the fractions, not the whole numbers. 3/4 plus 3/4. Well, when I add that, I get 6/4. What kind of fraction is 6/4? It's an improper fraction, so I do need to convert that to a mixed number. So I think, okay, 4 goes into 6 once, so I put a whole number 1. Then I think, okay, 4 goes into 6 once, that only gets me to 4. I need to get to 6, so that's 2 more pieces. So that 2 becomes my numerator, and I keep the 4 as my denominator. So 6/4 becomes 1 2/4. But can I reduce 2/4 right now?
Yes.
Yeah, 2/4 is the same as 1/2. So I changed 1 2/4 to 1 1/2. Now, if you chose not to convert it here or reduce it here, and you reduced or simplified at the end, you would also get the same answer as me. So 1 1/2. So now I have 1 1/2, but I can't forget about those whole numbers. I would need to add 8 plus 7 plus the 1 1/2. When I do that, I wind up with 16 1/2. Now, if you didn't reduce or simplify, you may have 16 and 2/4. So you want to try to simplify when you can. So our answer would be 16 and 1/2. Are there questions on 8 through 10? Questions on 8 through 10. Show me on your hand, how did you feel about 8 through 10? 1 through 5, how did you feel about these? Okay. Okay. How do we feel? Everyone should be showing me on your hand. Okay. Awesome. Hands down. Then we're going to do the last 2 problems on this page before we flip over to the word problems. So, we had more mixed numbers. So, for number 11, I immediately look at my fractions. I have 1/3 and 5/9, so a 3 and a 9. Well, my LCD then is 9, so I need to make sure both of those fractions have 9 as the denominator. So 3, I multiply that by 3 to get 9, so I would do the same thing to my 1. So 1/3 becomes 3/9. And I put the whole number next to it just so I could keep track. So 10 and 1/3 becomes 10 and 3/9. And then 5/9 already has a 9 as the denominator. So 10 and 3/9 plus 7 and 5/9. So now I'm going to break the fractions away from the whole numbers. I need to add 3/9 plus 5/9. That gets me 8/9. It's a proper fraction, and I can't reduce it. So then all that I need to do is add on the whole numbers to it. 10 plus 7 plus 8/9 equals 17 and 8/9. Then we had number 12, which that one was a little tricky because it's involving 3 fractions instead of just 2. So I looked at it, 3/4 plus 1/4 minus 1/6. So I'm looking at those denominators. I have a 4, and a 6. Well, what number does 4 and 6 both go into? 12 is actually the smallest one. You're right, 24 would work, but 12 is the smallest. So if you can see, it might be a little harder to see up there, I put next to each denominator what I needed to multiply it by in order to get 12. So next to the 4s, I put times 3. Next to the 6, I put times 2. So 3/4. When I multiply the denominator and the numerator by 3, that turns into 9/12. My 1/4, when I multiply the numerator and the denominator by 3, turns into 3/12. And the 1/6, when I multiply both by 2, turns into 2/12. And notice I kept the parentheses where they needed to be, so I didn't lose track of what I needed to do first. So even though I have this written here, the first thing I did was I subtracted 3/12 minus 2/12 because it's in parentheses. When I do that, I get 1/12, and then that's when I added on the plus 9/12. So 9/12 plus 1/12 equals 10/12. We can definitely reduce 10/12. Yes, so I divided both the numerator and the denominator by 2, and I wound up with 5/6. Are there questions on 11 and 12? All right, show me on your hands, 1 through 5. How did you feel about 11 and 12? How do we feel about these ones? Okay. Awesome. Hands down. Now we're going to flip to the back and do our 3-word problems before math. Okay. So for number 13, Gilberto worked 3 1/4 hours on Thursday and 4 2/5 hours on Friday. How many hours did he work in all? Show your work. So I like to rewrite the fractions or the mixed numbers when I get them. So I have 3 1/4 plus 4 2/5. Well, I know right away I need to find that least common denominator. So I have a 4 and a 5. Elena. The least common denominator would be 20 for 4 and 5. So that means to get to 20 from 4, I need to multiply it by 5. To get to 20 from 5, I need to multiply it by 4. So when I do that, my 1/4 becomes 5/20, and my 2/5 becomes 8/20. When I add those, 5/20 plus 8/20, I get 13/20. And I can't reduce 13/20. There is not a number that goes into both 13 and 20 besides 1. And then I added my 2 whole numbers, 3 plus 4, and I got 7. So 7 and 13/20 hours. You need to make sure you have a unit. It's a word problem, so you should have a word in your answer. 7 and 13/20 hours. Are there questions on number 13? Okay. Then we have number 14. So number 14, It was similar, but instead of adding for this one, we subtracted because it said Marie needs 2 1/4 yards of fabric, but she already has 1 3/8 yards. We need to find out how much more she needs. So we would take the total amount, 2 1/4, and we would subtract what she already has, 1 3/8. So when we do that, first of all, we find that common denominator. So 4 and 8, the common denominator is 8. So 2 1/4 would become 2 2/8, and then 1 3/8 would stay the same. Now, when I'm looking at this, can I do 2/8 minus 3/8? Fifth grade, can I take 2/8 and subtract 3/8 from it? No. So that's when I borrow from the whole number. So my 2 becomes a 1. And I would add, so right now our denominator is 8. So a whole would be 8/8. I took a whole away from the 2. So I would add an 8 onto my numerator. That would become 10. So 10/8. And remember that 2 became a 1. So it would be 1 10/8 minus 1 3/8. Guys, sit down. So then I would take 10/8 minus 3/8. That gets me 7/8. And well, 1 minus 1, that's 0. So 7/8 yards. Make sure you have that unit. Will, what's your question? You could say yards needed. Either one would work. Yards or yards needed. Yep, yards of fabric would work too. Awesome. Any questions on number 14? Okay, then we had number 15. So for number 15, we have 3 fractions. We're talking about where Sandra drove. She first drove for 1/3 of an hour to get to the store. Then she drove 1/5 of an hour to get to the library. Finally, she drove 1 2/15 hours to a friend's house. How many hours did Sandra drive in all? Show your work. So we want to know how many hours she drove in all, so that means we're adding all of them. So I went ahead and I wrote out all 3 of my fractions, and then I was looking at the denominators, 3, 5, and 15. Well, the least common denominator for those is 15. So next to my 1/3 and my 1/5, I put what I needed to multiply them by. Of course, 2/15 would stay the same because it already has 15 as the denominator. So I would need to multiply 3 by 5 to get 15, so I do the same to the top. So 1/3 would become 5/15. For 1/5, I need to multiply that 5 by 3 to get to 15, so I do the same thing to the numerator. So 1/5 would become 3/15, and like I said, 1 2/15 stays the same. So then suddenly, we have 5/15 plus 3/15 plus 1 2/15. Well, 5 plus 3 is 8, plus 2 is 10, so that's 10/15, and then we have that whole number 1, so 1 10/15. Well, I can divide both the 10 and the 15 by 5 to simplify, so when I do that, 10/15 becomes 2/3, so my answer would be 1 2/3 hours. Any questions on number 15? All right, show me on your hand 1 through 5. How did you feel about the word problems? How do we feel about the word problems? 1 through 5. Okay. Okay. Philip, how did you feel about the word problems? Zoe, how do you feel about those word problems? Layla, how do you feel about them? Okay. Okay. Hands down. Now, 5th grade, do you have any questions for me about your test tomorrow? Any questions? Will? It will be like, yeah, it would be around this amount of questions, yes. Any other questions? Jack L. Yes, so the layout will be the same. So you'll be kind of doing the same types of things. There'll be some estimating. There will be some finding the common denominator and rewriting the fractions with the denominator. There will be some just adding and subtracting fractions and mixed numbers, and then there will be some word problems. Any other questions? Richie?
Will there be an extra credit question?
There is an extra credit question. So you will have the opportunity to earn a point. So you could potentially earn above 100% on your test. Or if you were to get one wrong and get the extra credit right, you could still get 100% on your test. Any other questions? All right, 5th grade, nice job. What should you do with these review sheets tonight? What do you think? Raise your hand. What are some options? Allison? Mhm. Yes, look over them, and if there are any you got wrong, resolve them. Exactly. Practice solving them. I know that when we need to subtract in our fractions, we can't subtract them, like with 2/8 minus 3/8. I know that can get tricky, remembering how to borrow from the whole and adding the right amount to our numerator. Practice that. You can set up a problem yourself. You could just write, 2 and 1/4 minus 1 and 3/4. Practice that. You can write some practice problems for yourself to practice that skill. All right, 5th grade, nice work today.